My name is Emma Carter. I was in 11th grade, a busy high school student, when one lunch changed how I saw my parents. I thought we were fine. I was wrong. My days were simple. School in the morning, friends in the afternoon, homework at night. I never felt different from anyone else. I had lunch money in my bag. I had a small weekly allowance. I believed we were like other families. We were not rich, but we were okay. At least, that was what I thought. Now, years later, I can still see that day clearly. I can still feel the tightness in my throat. Nothing dramatic happened. No one was sick. It was a normal lunch. But that day quietly changed my life. Maybe you've had a moment like that too. A small moment that suddenly shows you the bigger picture. A moment when you begin to see the truth behind the scenes. That day, I learned something I should have noticed long before. I didn't know that everything I had came from what they didn't spend. Back then, my life felt normal. I had a small weekly allowance. It was not a lot, but it was always there. Every Monday, there was money in my hand or in my bag. I did not have to ask twice. The money was simply there. I had lunch money for school, and later I even had a small debit card for school lunches. I used it without thinking. I tapped the card, took my tray, and walked away. The price did not matter to me. I rarely wondered where the money came from. I simply believed we were fine. In the mornings, when my mom handed me some cash, she would say, "Here, this should be enough." She always said it in a calm voice. If I ever asked about money, she would smile and say, "Don't worry about us. We're fine." She said it so easily, so naturally. You've probably heard something like that before. My parents worked long shifts. My father wore his work clothes every day. My mother worked part-time to help make ends meet. But at home, they never talked about hard times. They never said we were on a tight budget. Money was something they kept to themselves. They never complained about financial pressure. They just carried on. Quiet strength, quiet sacrifice. We did not eat out often. We did not buy expensive things. But I did not think about that. I had what I needed. I could get by. I could join my friends. Nothing in my life felt missing. I thought this was normal. That day, my friends asked me to have lunch at a nice restaurant across the street from school. It was not a special day. It was just Friday. We walked in together, still wearing our backpacks. The place was bright and clean. The music was soft and light. My friends were laughing at something on their phones. I opened the menu and ordered without looking at the price. It felt like any other day. One of my friends smiled and said, "This place is so good." Another added, "Let's get dessert too." I nodded. I did not think twice. The food came. We talked about school, teachers, and weekend plans. I laughed. I checked my phone. I laughed again. For a moment, I felt proud that I could sit there and pay without worry. I told myself it didn't matter. Maybe I was overthinking. Everything felt easy. Just another lunch, just another afternoon with friends. Then, while reaching for my drink, I looked out the window. Across the street, near the construction site, I saw a man in work clothes sitting on a low wall. His shirt was dusty. His shoulders looked tired. He was holding a small metal lunchbox. He opened it slowly and started eating a simple, packed meal. It was my father. My hand stopped in the air. My fork felt heavy. I kept looking. He did not see me. He was eating quietly, alone. During his short break from long shifts, one of my friends followed my eyes and asked, "Your dad works there, right?" Her question hung in the air. For a second, the table went quiet. I felt their eyes on me. Have you ever felt that kind of silence? It is loud, even when no one speaks. I froze for a second. No one was laughing. No one was teasing, but I felt exposed. I nodded quickly and looked back at my plate. I took a long sip of water, hoping the conversation would move on. It did. They started talking again, but I couldn't. I looked down at my food. It suddenly felt too much, too expensive, too heavy. I heard the sound of cars outside. I heard someone laughing behind me. I could still see him across the street in my mind, eating that cheap lunch in his work clothes. I looked away, but I couldn't forget it. I didn't know that moment would follow me home. I tried to eat again. I picked up my fork and took a small bite, but I couldn't swallow. The food felt dry in my mouth. My throat felt tight. I forced myself to chew, but it would not go down. I put my fork back on the plate. Across the street, my father opened his metal lunchbox all the way. He did it slowly, like he had done it many times before. Inside, I saw simple food. Rice. Maybe some vegetables. Nothing special. Nothing warm. He held the box in one hand and ate with the other. He did not look around. He did not complain. He just ate quietly during his short break from long shifts. The smell of warm rice drifted across the street. I don't know if it was real or just in my mind, but suddenly I didn't feel hungry anymore. My hands were still. My eyes stayed fixed on him. My breathing felt shallow. The noise in the restaurant faded. The music, the laughter, the plates on the table, all of it felt far away. Was this just today? Or had I never really looked before? I watched him take another bite. He ate slowly, carefully, as if every penny counted. And for the first time, I started to see small things I had ignored before. The simple meals, the work clothes, the quiet way he always said he was fine. Something shifted inside me. That lunch was no longer just lunch. A few days later, I stood outside my parents' bedroom door. I was about to ask my mom something about school. The light inside was on. Their voices were low. I was not trying to listen, but then I heard my name. My father said, "We can skip eating out this month. Her tuition comes first." There was a short pause. I held my breath. My mom answered softly, "She has to focus on school. We'll be fine." Then she added, almost in a whisper, "It's just for a while." My hand was still on the door. My fingers started to shake. I did not knock. I could not move. I just stood there, frozen. Through the small opening, I saw my desk across the hallway. My books were on it. My laptop, my notes. Everything looked the same as always. But suddenly, it felt different. For the first time, I understood that everything on that desk had a real cost. It was not just paper and plastic. It was hard-earned money. It was long shifts. It was simple meals. It was my father in his work clothes, eating that cheap lunch across the street. I stepped back into the dark hallway. The house was quiet. I could hear my own breathing. It felt loud in my ears. She had always had enough, because they chose to have less. For the first time, I understood that the cheap lunch was not about money. It was my tuition. It was my future. I covered my mouth with my hand. Tears filled my eyes, but no sound came out. That's when it hit me. That night, I could not sleep. I lay in my bed and stared at the ceiling. The room was dark, but my mind was loud. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my father across the street in his work clothes. I saw the cheap lunch in his hands. I heard my mom's voice again. "We'll be fine." The words did not sound the same anymore. After a while, I got up and walked into the kitchen for some water. The house was quiet. The clock on the wall ticked softly. I tried not to make noise. On the counter, I saw my father's metal lunchbox. It was closed, but there were small scratches on the lid. I had seen it many times before. I had never really looked at it. I opened the fridge. Inside, there were simple things: rice in a small container, eggs, leftovers in plastic boxes. Nothing special, just enough. I stood there for a long time, holding the fridge door. The cold air touched my face. My chest felt heavy. I swallowed hard. I did not need anyone to explain anything to me. The kitchen was saying, "Enough." That was when the truth started to sink in. I began to see things I had never noticed before. The next morning, nothing looked different. The house was the same, the street was the same, but I was not the same. I stood in front of the mirror and took a slow breath. I said to myself, very quietly, I couldn't live the same way anymore. I couldn't keep pretending everything was normal. It wasn't only about guilt. Yes, I felt ashamed that I had never asked where the money came from, but it was more than that. It was about direction. I had seen the real cost behind small choices. I had begun to understand what was under the surface. After that, I began to cut back. When my friends wanted to eat out, I sometimes turned down the invitation. I stopped asking for things I didn't truly need. Slowly, I packed my own lunch some days. Simple food, nothing special. I paid more attention to prices. Every penny counts, I told myself. One afternoon, a friend looked at me and asked, "Why didn't you order?" I smiled a little and said, "I'm good." That was all. No long explanation. Growing up isn't loud. Sometimes it's quiet. When you start noticing, you can't go back. That cheap lunch was no longer just a moment across the street. It became a compass for my life. Years later, my life looked very different, but the road was not easy. After college, I applied for an internship I really wanted. I thought I was ready. I thought I worked hard enough. Then I got the email. I read it once, then again, then a third time. I had been rejected. I stared at the screen for a long time. My hands felt cold. For a moment, I wanted to give up. I felt like I was falling behind while everyone else was moving forward. I closed my laptop and sat there in silence. That night, I remembered the cheap lunch across the street. I saw my father in his work clothes again. I saw the way he ate slowly, without complaining. They had carried the weight quietly for years. They had been trying to make ends meet so I would not fall behind. I took a deep breath. I told myself to carry on. Success did not come fast. It came slowly, step by step. I kept working hard. I held on to that memory. I never saw that street the same way again. One evening, after I finally built a stable life, I took my parents to a restaurant. When the menu came, I saw my father's eyes pause at the right side of the page, where the prices were. I felt my heart beat faster for a moment. "Dad," I said softly, "let's get the steak. I know you like it." My voice felt steadier than I expected. He looked up at me, surprised. "That's too much," he said. "It's okay," I answered. "You don't have to choose the cheapest one anymore." He looked at me for a second. He didn't say anything. He just nodded and smiled. He didn't say he was proud, but I could see it, and that was enough. Sometimes the things we do not see carry the most weight. A packed meal, work clothes at noon, a quiet choice to save money, a father eating alone during a short break. These small things can shape a whole life. Sometimes love works quietly, behind the scenes. It does not always speak loudly. It does not always explain itself. It simply shows up, every day, and carries the weight without complaint. I used to think success was about talent or luck. Now I see the bigger picture. It was built on hard-earned money. It was built on long shifts and small choices. Actions speak louder than words. My parents never gave long speeches. They just did without, so I would not fall behind. They carried the weight, so I could carry a future. My future started on the other side of that street. Sometimes you think everything is normal. You move through your days and never ask where the money comes from. You may have taken small things for granted. You may not have seen it at the time. Maybe you're starting to see it now. When you begin to look closer, you notice what happens behind the scenes. You see that small choices have a real cost. Someone may have been putting you first while learning to get by. Someone may have chosen to do without so you would not fall behind. And once you truly see that, something inside you shifts. Sometimes understanding begins at home. Growing up often starts with noticing. You begin to cut back, not because you are forced to, but because you choose to. Hard-earned money feels different when you understand its weight. Gratitude becomes direction. You start asking yourself not only how to succeed, but who you are succeeding for, and what truly matters behind that success. At Peak, we believe growth begins with awareness like this, the moment you finally see what was always there. You think about how to stand by the people who once stood by you, not in big words, in steady actions, in quiet support. Success is not only about earning more. It is about remembering where you started and choosing to give back with intention. Sometimes one small moment can quietly change how you live. Before you go, think about this. What's one small thing your parents did that you only understood years later? Maybe it seemed normal at the time. Maybe you didn't see the bigger picture. Share your story below. I'd really love to read it. If this story reminded you of something, comment one word: grateful. And if you're watching with your parents in mind, maybe send them a message after this. See you in the next story.